Islam, Islam, Islam family. We are once again here to educate and teach. Um, just trying to make sure that to educate and teach, and I want to make sure that I'm sharing this. Okay. Um, well, I was hoping I was going to be able to share. Um, um, okay, so hopefully somebody who knows what I'm supposed to be doing can help with that. So anyway, our topic today is Jubilee the Uncelebrated. And we want to make sure that I can share this myself. And of course, it's not working for me. Let me try it on my. So just bear with me a second. I'm just trying to see if I can do something on my Facebook page. I'm going to get somebody to help me with this eventually. Anyway, let's get started. Let's get started. And if you can, you can tune in. So, of course, we always start with the Bush American prayer. Islam, Islam, Islam. Allah, the Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation. By night and by day, through his holy prophet, Jubilee. Amen. And I'm going to move on from there. And of course, trying to follow my order here. Giving praises to the causeless cause and the rootless root from which all things have come, and that would be the great God Allah. Honor to the last prophet in this dispensation, Prophet Noble Drew Ali. We have the founder, we have Prophet Noble Drew Ali reincarnated, and we have Prophet Noble Drew Ali the third. I give a special honor to my teacher, Grand Sheik Richardson Dingle Eel, Prophet Noble Drew Ali III, as well as to his brother, Grand Sheik Timothy Dingle Eel, hyphen Prophet, God, Man, and Moses. And one day I have to do a show on that because I know people always like, what's she talking about? Um, it was they who confronted Pharaoh and established the means of our people to be registered and receive actual freedom, according to the 188,000 forefathers who fought, and some who gave their lives, that this nation, the Moorish American nation, would have a true birth of freedom. I give honor to President Abraham Lincoln, as well as to Marcus Mosiah Garvey, the forerunner. I give honor to Supreme Grand Sheik Clarence Prather-Eel and his wife, Sheikess Betty Prather-Eel. I give honor to our National Grand Sheikess, as well as our home temple Grand Sheikess, Tiffany Jones Bay, and to our National Council, as well as our home temple at 2900 West Pressman Street. So once again, I'm going to welcome you to the light. And the light is the divine illumination that reveals the soul, to the spirit. It overcomes darkness and leads the way to salvation and resurrection. Islam, welcome to the Moorish Light, the Soul School, shining light, clearing up the confusion, and teaching the basic facts. Our objective is unity and manifesting the ultimate goal of the Moorish movement. And guess what we're not going to do? We're not going to dispute charters, who's the Supreme Grand Sheik. We are here to establish a basic foundation in the Moorish movement. So, let us begin. And of course, you know what I'm going to do. I'm going to share my screen. And we're going to begin, as always, reading from the Holy Quran of Mecca. I didn't do that right. I had to do that from here. And we're reading from Surah 2, Ayat 76. It says, "Behold, when they meet," and we'll be looking at footnote 83, "the men of faith, they say, 'We believe.' But when they meet each other in private, they say, 'Shall you tell them what Allah hath revealed to you, that they may engage you in argument about it before your Lord? Do you not understand the aim?'" So let's see how large I can make this so you can read along with me. It says the immediate argument applies so the Jews of Medina, but the more general argument applies to people of faith and the people without faith, as we shall see below. If the Muslims of Medina ever entertained the hope that the Jews in their city would as a body welcome Muhammad Mustafa as the prophet, prophesied in their own books, they were mistaken. In Deuteronomy 18:18 they read, "I will raise them up a prophet from among their brethren, like unto thee, like unto Moses," which was interpreted by some of their doctors as referring to Muhammad, and they came into Islam. The Arabs are a kindred branch of the Semitic family and are correctly described in relation to the Jews as their brethren. There is no question that there was not another prophet like unto Moses until Muhammad came. In fact, the proscript of Deuteronomy, which was written many centuries after Moses, there arose not a prophet since in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. But the Jews as a body were jealous of Muhammad and played a double part. So when the Muslim community began to grow stronger, they pretended to be of them, but really tried to keep back any knowledge of their own scriptures from them, lest they should be beaten by their own arguments. So that's like withholding the truth, or as some people, throwing a rock and hiding your hand. So when we look at history and we look at our prophets, because the Quran, the Bible teaches that all prophets are of the same brotherhood. So, you know, they didn't want to admit, and let me say this, let me put this in modern day terms. People today don't want to admit to Prophet Noble Drew Ali, but they want to use his teachings. And they want to create all these little things outside of the Moorish Science Temple Divine and National Movement to say that I got it. Well, if you took the truth from the Moorish Science Temple, the truth is only going to truly work in the Moorish Science Temple. You might blow yourself up or whatever, you might get all these accolades, you might get some people following you, but you can't change the truth. It says the more general interpretation holds good in all ages, faith and unfaith. And that's the real argument. Faith and unfaith are pitted against each other. Faith has to struggle against power, position, organization, and privilege. I bear witness, I bear witness, I bear witness. Let me read that again. Faith has to struggle against power, position, organization, and privilege. I was looking at a movie, Alchemy of the Souls, and there was a scene in that movie where everybody had come together and they were going to basically set the world on fire so they could get this stone. And so the one person who was standing asked them, why does faith have to go through so much? And evil just running around running amok. And of course, at that point, he had to demonstrate his faith, and he had to fight. And guess what? They stabbed him in the back. That's how they got him. But in its own mind, it is jealous of the armory of science and knowledge which faith brings into the service of Allah. But Allah knows all. And if the people of faith would only seek knowledge sincerely, where they can find it, even as far afield as China, as Muhammad said, they can defeat unfaith on its own ground. Even though the directive that the Muslims should derive knowledge regardless of its location is so acceptable proposition from the Islamic viewpoint, the tradition to which the author refers here is not authentic. So here we are, and there's a few faithful. It's not a lot of faithful. There's a few faithful, and the few faithful got to tangle and wrestle with those who I'll say who believe. And there's a difference in believing and having faith. Because belief is what you think perhaps is truth. And if you think perhaps it's truth, you will flip and toss and turn and do all kinds of things. But when you have faith, you are steadfast. You don't change when you have faith. So let's get into our topic. Now I had this posted on my Facebook page today because usually what I talk about I kind of post. So I'm going to actually read this and I'm going to stop sharing. And if you want to see it, you can see it on the Facebook page. Okay? So, here's what it said. Always giving praises to Allah and honor to the last prophet in this dispensation, Prophet Noble Jubilee, the first, second, and third. And then I quote, because I was teaching Sunday school, and I like to thank She Pennington, for having me to sub-teach Sunday school. And we talked about Jubilee. And that is what we're going to talk about. But I want to open it up this way. And ye shall hallow the 50th year, and proclaim liberty throughout all the land, unto all the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a jubilee unto you. Ye shall return every man unto his possessions, and ye shall return every man unto his family. That's Leviticus 25:10. Then we go into the Holy Quran, chapter 46. The lamb is the poor people, the lion is the rulers, and the rich. Through love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, all men are one and equal to seek their own destiny. and to worship under their own vine and fig tree after the principles of the holy and divine laws of their forefathers. Then we go to Acts 6. With us, all members must proclaim their nationality, and we are teaching our people their nationality and their divine creed. What do these have in common? Well, what they have in common is they all are talking about people going back to their own. And what I mean by that, meaning honoring their forefathers. On the back of our Quran, it does say, I know I got it somewhere in my multiple papers, and I could read it, but it says the uniting of Asia, right? So it's another way I can do this. And I'm going to do it this way that I'm going to share with you. Because I need us to clearly okay. So let me go back here. Let me share my screen. Because we carry the Quran with us all the time. And it says the Holy Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Know yourself and your Father God Allah. Is it talking about you personally? Or is it talking about your forefathers? And it is a part. There is a personal part to it. I'm not saying that. But at this point in juncture, what are we talking about? Let's see if what I'm saying is correct. That you may learn to love instead of hate. Every man need to worship under his what? His own vine and fig tree, the uniting of Asia. So if we go back to Acts 6 and it says every member must proclaim their nationality, that means when you step into the Moorish Science Temple, you need to honor your forefathers. We're not here to make you Moorish Americans. We're here to help educate you so you can go back home and help educate your people to get back to honoring their forefathers and living according to those divine laws, those holy and divine laws of their forefathers. Because, see, we don't want to get caught in the same concept as Christianity. And why I say that is because under Christianity, we worship the European Jesus. And it was a European Jesus because it was established for the European. But then we're going to tell everybody that Jesus looks like him. Well, that's not true. If I was a cat and I had a God, would it look like a dove? Or would it look like a cat? You need to ask yourself this very simple question. And so we talking, remember our topic is the uncelebrated Jubilee. So before I let me stop sharing for a minute. Before I share again, I'm going to talk about Jubilee, but first I need to define to you what should happen in Jubilee. And why are we talking about Jubilee? We're talking about Jubilee because the Prophet came in 1913. Our Jubilee should have been 50 years after 1863. 1863 will bring us into 1913, the year we should have been celebrating our first Jubilee. 50 years have passed. A generation should have changed mentally and physically from slavery to thinking about freedom and taking accountability for themselves. So let's see what Jubilee means. Let's see if we can get there. And we're talking about as it is in the Bible, as well as it is inscribed on the Liberty Bell, the 66 in Chestnut Street in Philadelphia, our ancient landmark. Let nobody deceive you. And before I go there, because have you ever asked yourself why were they in Gettysburg and not going to Washington, D.C.? What were they in Pennsylvania trying to get to? What is it that they wanted to destroy? I want you to think about that. It says a jubilee is a special year of liberation. Listen to the words: liberation and restoration. That was to be celebrated every 50 years after 7 cycles of 7 sabbatical years. It was a time for releasing slaves, forgiving debts, and returning land to its original owners, as proclaimed by the sounding of a ram's horn, Yobel. The Jubilee was a holy year for the Israelites, providing both physical and spiritual rest and a renewal of relationships with God and each other. Now I'm going to be facetious. So if Jubilee is something we celebrate every 50 years, why hasn't the Palestinian been restored? What does it say? Liberation and restoration? Releasing of slaves, forgiving of debts, returning land to its original owner. Just something to think about. If this is the law you live by, then you should live by that law. So 1913 was our first Jubilee. Let's see what was happening in the country with us in 1913. Okay. So I have to stop sharing this one. And I have to start sharing. Let's see. (1913). 1913. This is what the prophet came into in 1913. In 1913, African Americans faced systemic and severe discrimination marked by the widespread enforcement of Jim Crow laws, the systematic stripping of voting rights, pervasive residential segregation, and notably the resegregation of the federal workforce under President Woodrow Wilson's new administration. Now, this is what the prophet came into. Disenfranchisement. Most so-called African Americans in the South had effectively lost the right to vote through discriminatory state laws, such as poll taxes, literacy tests, which included loopholes like grandfather clauses to protect so-called white voters. Federal segregation. Upon taking office in 1913, President Woodrow Wilson's administration implemented policies to segregate the federal civil service for the first time since Reconstruction. This meant separate offices, restrooms, cafeterias, leading to the demotion of many so-called black employees to lower paying jobs, effectively cutting off their access to career and social mobility within the government. This is what Prophet Noble Drew Ali came into. You have pervasive segregation, Jim Crow laws and customs dictating nearly every aspect of life, creating separate and inferior systems for schools, hospitals, libraries, parks, transportation, and most public accommodations. And so you hear this, and I want you to just think ahead for a minute. Has integration changed that? Just want you to think about it. And then I had something else to add to that comment. Racial violence. So called African Americans lived under the constant threat of violence, including lynchings, which were used as a tool of racial terror and social control, particularly in the South. Restrictive covenants, other practices limited where African Americans could live, enforcing residential segregation, leading to declines in so-called black home ownership in some areas such as Washington, D.C., following the federal government's policy changes. And it says resistance in progress. Despite these conditions, the era was not without resistance. Organizations like the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, founded in 1909, the National Urban League, founded in 1911. This is to promote the so-called Negro. But nobody was promoting actual freedom. Nobody was promoting enforcing the policies found in the proclamations. Nobody's promoting taking us through an emancipation process. They're trying to find a way to be next to the European and do what the European. They didn't want to improve the schools in their neighborhoods. They wanted to go to the same school as the European. Never thinking of self-survival. Never thinking of self-progress. Because in their minds, in the mental slave mindset, progress is following my so-called master and doing whatever he does. So we eventually integrated, and I'm getting ahead of my story, so let me back up. So this is what was happening in 1913. Prophet Noble Drew Ali came on the scene. Said, come all ye Asiatics, hear the truth about your nationality and birthrights. He began to talk a language that our people wasn't used to. We were accustomed to having the same name as our so-called master. We're kind of accustomed to that today, too. And that change should not happen through name change, but a change should happen. Let's be clear. So that's 1913. The prophet comes on the scene. And so what I did was I just did a little research, and there was a great flood in the country in 1913. But you can look that up on your time. I can't tell you everything. So that was our first Jubilee, 1913. A prophet came on the scene. Then our next Jubilee was 50 years later, 1963. Should have been our second Jubilee. Now I know it has to be from the proclamations, because now I'm going to read to you something that Martin Luther King said, so that you can actually see that that's the right track. But nobody's reading the proclamation. They're just mentioning the proclamation and pursuing, fighting what they call discrimination. Let's see if we can go there. So I'm going to share again. And let's see if I can find that speech. Okay. So somebody say, well, we shouldn't be looking at the proclamations. You know you do. You know y'all do. Y'all need to stop. learn something. This is the I Have a Dream speech by Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. at the March on Washington, 1963. Do you know 250,000 people stood at the Lincoln Memorial and asked for integration? Because they thought separate but equal was a crime. They thought improving their own conditions where they were was a crime. That they would be better off going to the European restaurant, giving them their money, than supporting their own. That's a terrible mindset. But let's read. I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree is a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who have been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to the end of the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still badly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. So we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. He recognized the proclamations, but he did not explain what the proclamations require. That January the 1st proclamation says anytime we were to make moves for our actual freedom, the military, the executive, or judicial, no government agency should stand in our way. 2025. And where are we? We got some better looking plantations now. We got a better training ground to perpetuate a system that limits us. And what we need to understand, or what we should understand, is that when you open the door and give us opportunity, we're very successful. We beg to go through that door when what we should have done was create our own. So let's see what happened. What was happening in 1963. I just thought I would share that with you. Let me stop sharing this. Because it's essential that you, as Moorish Americans, you've got to know your history. I just want you got to know your history. So we're going to share some more history. So let's see. What was happening in this country in 1963? Let's see. I know I have it up. Let's see if I can find it. Here we go. Oh, so we have the dramatic events of 1963, and the widespread media coverage generated political pressure that led President John F. Kennedy to propose comprehensive civil rights legislation. Following his assassination, President Lyndon B. Johnson championed the bill, leading to the passage of the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Hmm. So let's go up. Segregation in public accommodations. Jim Crow laws were prevalent in the South. States legally required racial segregation in all aspects of life, including schools, transportation, restaurants, hotels, and other public facilities. Schools for so called black students were often underfunded, overcrowded, and in poor condition compared to those for the white schools. So, why didn't we fight for more funds to build up what we had? Why didn't we ask for more funds? Why did we think going to the European school would do us better than fixing up our own schools and educating our children? Voting rights restrictions. Despite the 15th Amendment, most so called black people in the South were effectively denied the right to vote through various discriminatory practices like literacy tests, poll taxes, and white primaries. primaries. Only about 10% of the so called black population was registered to vote in Birmingham, Alabama in 1960. Economic inequality and employment discrimination. So called African Americans faced significant barriers to employment and were largely restricted to low paying manual labor, household service jobs. The average income for so called black employees were often less than half of the so called white employees. And the unemployment rate for so called black people was more than double that of so called white people. Discrimination in housing was also widespread. Violence and intimidation. So called black communities were subject to a constant threat of violence, including bombings, lynchings, police brutality. Law enforcement often participated in and ignored violence against activists. A notable example was the brutal attack on a student staging a sit in at the Woolworth's lunch counter in Jackson, Mississippi, May 1963. And of course, we talked about the March on Washington. Oh, 19, there was a year, the intensive, if you ever seen the movie Martin Luther King, you see the Birmingham campaign led by Dr. Martin Luther King used mass protests that were met with violence from police dogs, high pressure fire hoses, capturing national and international attention. This culminated into the historic March in Washington. Look at what they're walking for: jobs and freedom. In August, there were over 250,000 people gathered to demand civil and economic rights and pressure the government for legislative action. I just need you to see what's going on. So that was 1963. But I do need to go back because there was a meeting held with Dr. King, and I gotta go back to that speech. Let me stop sharing. Share again. Let's see if I can find it. Now, one of the things that nobody really ever talks about is this little portion here in this speech. And hopefully it'll be soon. This is when I need my person who helps me in history and all class, because he would have had this found and everything, and I gotta go here and look for it. Um, Hopefully I can find it. Okay, that's the beginning. And only because of time. I have to do it this way. Okay, that's a different speech as well. Let's see if this. Just go. Okay, so I think this is it. And he says in this speech, I have been to the mountaintop. I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. What was he talking about? That'll be a lesson we will do, but not today. So, let me stop sharing. I'll go back to my screen here. So now we're into our third Jubilee. We haven't opened our mouths. We haven't made a comment, a quote. We're not even talking about Jubilee. 2013 was just 12 years ago. That was our third Jubilee. The next Jubilee is 2063. I'll be there, but I might be in another form, but I'll be there. So let's see what happened in 2013. We done talked about 1963. We talked about 1913. We talked about 1963. Let's see what was happening in 2013. The uncelebrated Jubilee. And remember what we said Jubilee was now. These are the events of 2013. I got to stay cognizant of the time. In 2013, so-called African Americans experienced a year marked by significant civil rights anniversaries, high-profile social justice events, and persistent economic and health disparities. Anniversaries in commemoration 2013 include the 150th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. We keep going back to it, but nobody's reading. 150 years later, we don't even want to hear it because somebody took a letter out of a paper and said all Lincoln wanted to do was save the Union. But you're still celebrating the proclamation 150 years later. The 50th anniversary of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. George Zimmerman was acquitted. The acquittal of George Zimmerman in the Trayvon Martin case reignited debates about racial profiling and racial attitudes in America. They don't really go anywhere. They just get quiet. Because race should not even be an issue. But when you go on a mental plantation, race is always the issue. It says discussion reports from 2013 indicated a majority of Americans and so-called Black Americans believe racial discrimination remained a factor in American life. 42 million African Americans lived in the U.S., making up 13% of the total population, with concentrations in the South, major urban areas. Immigrations. So-called black immigrants, mostly from Caribbean and Africa, represented a growing portion of the black population. Employment. The average monthly unemployment rate for so-called African Americans was 13.1%, significantly higher than the national average. Between 2010-2013, the median income for minority households decreased by 9%, while non-Hispanic white households saw a 1% increase. Health. Projections for 2013 include an estimated 176,620 new cancer cases, 64,880 deaths among African Americans. The Affordable Care Act was seen as a way to expand health care access for African Americans, a group with a high rate of being uninsured. And then we have PBS did a special African Americans Many Rivers to Cross. National African American History Month 2013 theme was At the Crossroads of Freedom and Equality, the Emancipation Proclamation, and the March on Washington. Why do they keep talking about the Emancipation Proclamation and never ever read it? I find that absolutely amazing. And I also see I'm running out of time here too. So I'm hoping that uh, this program gives you a wider perspective of why the Moorish Science Temple is here, because what's on the table is still on the table, and we have to get it off the table, the plan, and get it into action. And when I say that, I'm talking about actual freedom. What do I mean by actual freedom? Jubilee. What do I mean by Jubilee? Let me read that definition. You know what, I'm going to read that definition again, because I think y'all need to hear that, because I don't think you're getting it. I want to make sure that you are getting it, because Hebrew law is the law upon which this country was founded. Don't let nobody fool you. Don't let nobody fool you, because you couldn't come from a monarchy and set up a democracy. Just know that. Just know that. It says in the Bible, a jubilee is a special year of liberation and restoration that was to be celebrated every 50 years after 7 cycles of 7 sabbatical years. It was a time for releasing slaves, forgiving debts, and returning land to its original owners, as proclaimed by the sounding of the ram's horn, and in our case it would be the ringing of the Liberty Bell. The Jubilee was a holy year for the Israelites, a holy year for the Moorish Americans, providing both physical and spiritual rest and a renewal of relationship with the great God Allah and each other. We need a Moorish American Jubilee. Yeah, we do. I had a revelation right here. A Moorish American Jubilee where we restore, where we liberate ourselves of our own understanding and restore the teachings of Prophet Noble Drew Ali, so that we can get back on the mission of gaining true citizenship, so that we can get back on the mission of removing these slave labels, so that we can get back on the mission of building a nationhood instead of a temple, but building a movement on the simple truth. We all studying the same lessons, so it should not be a problem. We should have faith in what we have. And one of the things that I'm going to close with, if I can find it in time, because time is running out on me today. And this is from the oops, just going to read this to you, because sometimes you do need to hear. You got to use your ears, your eyes, your 5 senses. So there isn't but one supreme issue for my people to use to redeem that which was lost, and that is through the above statements. Then the lion and the lamb can lie down together in yonder hills, and neither will be harmed, because love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice will be reigning in the land in those days. The United States will be one of the greatest civilized and prosperous governments of the world. But if the above principles are not carried out by the citizens and my people in this government, the worst is yet to come, because the great God of the universe is not pleased with the works that are being performed in North America by my people. And this great sin must be removed from the land to save it from enormous earthquakes, diseases, etc. So, of course, like I said, my time is up. I'll invite you to my temple at 1055 North Milton Avenue. Next meeting's Holy Night, 2900 Pressman Street. You can go to morsehistoryandlaw.net and find other locations. Because I'm running out of time, I don't have time to do all that. But one day, the next time, I'll make sure I'll show you how to operate that. Um, Also, Founders Day, which is the Prophet's Earth Day, is going to be celebrated, and I think it's at Unity Hall. But I can let you know that for certain next week. But I do want to say, in closing, we got we got a great job to do. We thinking we only helping Moorish Americans. Guess what? We helping the world, but we got to start with ourselves. Because if you can't help yourself, you can't help nobody else. So let's show that the prophet established and incorporated the Moorish Science Temple, and that we recognize it as other nations have and will when we get ourselves in one accord. So I'd like to thank you and appreciate you. On my closing note, embrace the prophet, embrace Allah, embrace divine and national, and embrace the mission. I thank you and appreciate you for allowing me to bring to you the Moorish light in love and understanding. If you have any questions, please just post them out. This will be posted on Facebook. Please just ask your questions, because I know you complain to me a lot. So how about asking a question for a change? And know that we do this in love, not hate. So as I said, um, this is it. I have nothing left to say, so I'm going to say peace and love.